All right, how's it going, guys? It's Steve with Interglobal Comics. Just wanted to make a quick video kind of going over this latest Comic Connects auction that just finished up. What was that, Sunday night, I guess, 2 nights ago? I was keeping a pretty good eye on it because there's some pretty good books in there, and up until, even an hour or two before the auction ended, there were everything was still relatively cheap and pretty much well undervalued. But some things did, my kind of overall view of the auction was, some things kind of went nuclear, and a lot of, I'd say almost a majority of it, kind of underperformed, in my opinion, just compared to, previous auctions at, Comic Connect and Heritage, as well as just what you could potentially sell these books for on eBay. So I'm just going to kind of real quickly go through these. I don't really want to make a two-part video. So, some of these I'm not even going to comment on. I'm just going to kind of scroll through. All right, here we go. So this is a pretty, famous Golden Age Batman cover. This one's from Brazil. This one sold for $320, which I don't think anyone, in Brazil is going to sell you a copy even close to this price. It does look like it was, had some restoration to it. Or restoration, or maybe even, preservation, I guess. But either way, it seems like 320 was a pretty good deal for, having the Batman 25 cover on it. Kind of a famous, iconic Golden Age cover. Kolos, Norwegian Incredible Hulk #2, not the huge key of #1, but still, a sought after book. $285. That's incredibly cheap. I don't think you're gonna find anyone in Norway that'll sell you that book that cheap. So it's an kind of interesting phenomenon where we're now at a point in the comic market where foreign sellers, like these people in foreign countries that own these books, are asking more than these books are selling for in America. So that's kind of the opposite of how it's always been. Before you could probably have picked this book up for, $20 from a Norwegian seller that just had no idea that it was worth anything. That would have been, years ago, but still, you kind of understand what I'm saying. So I'm not sure really what the foreign sellers, if they're going to have to start adjusting their prices because, when Americans see a lot of these results at these big Comic Connect auctions and, other foreign market or, where people are buying foreign books like eBay and Heritage, as the prices are kind of dipping, the economy is not doing too great. And, the comic market in general is just tanking, compared to where it was 2 years ago. At some point they're going to have to start dropping their prices. People aren't going to pay the big bucks, and if they can't, if they feel the value of the book is actually going down once it reaches American soil, then, they're just going to stop buying these books. So we'll have to kind of see how that all plays out. But yeah, that was a real cheap price. Here's another one. Norway. Really hard to get books from Norway. First appearance of the Scorpion. Sold for $110, and incredibly cheap. Not a huge key, but still a first appearance of a famous Spider-Man villain. Restored Giant Size X-Men 1. Not really sure why someone would submit this. 3 edges trimmed. Sold for $65. So a lot of this stuff I'm just going to kind of breeze through. A famous Frazetta cover, but this is Weird Science Fantasy Mexico 29, went for $488. So it seems like a respectable number for that book. This one I think seems like it went pretty inexpensive. Weird Horror 7. But it does have tape and color touch along the spine, so that went for $192. So that was pretty cheap. All right, let's keep going. Uncanny Tales 64. So that's the first appearance of Vision from the UK. Went for $184, which seems very cheap for that grade of a UK book. Not really a huge key, I would say, anymore. And I feel like, I don't know, Vision's a big character just from the Avengers movies and stuff. But I think his keys have kind of dropped off some. But still, a great, awesome cover. 9-4. This one kind of surprised me. 9-4 Ultimate Fallout from Italy. Uh, this is obviously the variant cover, and this one went for 382, which is more than I expected. I thought it was going to probably go for closer to 200. I have a 9.8 of this, so I'm happy to see those numbers. So yeah, 382 for a 9.4. Vampirella 1 from Brazil, 310, seems pretty inexpensive, and this is a pretty tough book to find out of Brazil, and it's a cool kind of modified cover with the blue background and the kind of the ghouls on the side. So yeah, that's pretty cheap because 4.5 is not bad for Brazil. 5.5 Tomb of Dracula 10 went for 150. It seems about average. 9.0 Tomb of Dracula 10, so incredibly hard book to get in that grade from Canada, French Canadian. It's super high grade. Went for 801. I'm not sure what the American version goes for, but 801 seems like a decent number. I think this might have been one of Rob Fordham's books. I'm sure he was probably hoping for more, but I think that's still a respectable number. Let's see what we got. Some of these random Star Wars books were pretty surprising. This is like a magazine-sized book from Finland. Sold for $471 for a 3.0. I'm pretty sure I had this, or maybe it was from Norway, the same cover, or maybe Denmark, I'm not sure. But I definitely didn't sell it for anywhere near $500. The first Superman in Spain from 1942, still respectable, not even slab, just raw for $9.48. So that was a good sale there. Gonna kind of breeze through these. Like some of the stuff, I'm not sure why some of the stuff was even listed. UK 121 for $20, and these are just kind of filler books. Like this book is from Spain. You can't touch this book for $7 on the Spanish market, so someone got a steal there. And I think there was a slab version of that as well that sold for pretty cheap. Here's the 8.0 for $55, and you would probably have to pay $55. You'd be paying probably $20 alone in shipping just to get it from Spain. So 8.0 is a pretty decent number. So yeah, that was a good steal. It's a modern kind of reprint of that. The 129, but still it's not the easiest to find anymore. Some of these Vertice books, like these repainted Lopez Espy covers, they didn't really sell for very much because most of them weren't keys, but I was surprised to see this one, the first appearance of Craven, went for $111. That surprised me. I didn't think that would sell for anywhere near that high. So, it's kind of cool. Maybe his art's getting a little bit of respect. Some of these covers, they're not the best art, but some are actually really good. So, it's just kind of hit or miss with Lopez Espy. This went really cheap. Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos 13 from Mexico. La Prensa 5.5, which I would say is pretty decent, decent grade, and pretty much high grade, I would say, for Mexico. 111. That's super cheap. I kind of wish I would have been watching that one a little more closely. And then this surprised me as well, a Newton Silver Surfer 1 for $461. And I guess I shouldn't be too surprised since these were selling almost, all these Newton keys were selling for almost $1,000, a couple years ago. But they've definitely dropped off a pretty huge amount. So seeing this back up to $461, and it seems pretty good. I'm gonna just kind of breeze through this stuff. I don't know all that much about. A bunch of Brazilian horror books sold. Jaime Cortez covers, I think. Not too sure. Not really my realm of expertise. So here's the huge sale of the night for $13,225. This is the first appearance of Robin. but the Brazilian edition from 1941. So pretty cool, piece of history right there. And the fact that it's not restored is pretty amazing. So that was a pretty big money book there. Bunch of other, so most of these Brazilian books sold actually pretty inexpensive, I think. A lot of these Brazilian books are pretty hard to find these days for under $500. So a lot of these, this one went for 1,800. So that was a good sale, and it's restored. But yeah, so a lot of the Brazilian books, I think the market is maybe kind of getting saturated with, especially the Comic Connect auctions with these Brazilian books, because the majority of these books are being submitted, I believe, by Sky Ott, who is in Brazil. So he has all the Brazilian keys. He's got like a warehouse full of foreign comics. The Brazilian books are just kind of taking a hit because so many of them keep showing up every auction, I think. This was the first appearance of Groot. The UK edition went for $362. Not a bad sale. Probably, not good, not bad. So these have really taken a dive. These Italian Marvel Spotlight 5s at one point were selling, I think, over $1,000, graded, decent condition. But they've come down to $276, which is pretty cheap, and it's pretty silly that they had two of the exact same grade right next to each other listed. So obviously that's going to drive the price down. They probably could have gotten twice that amount had they not done that. This is the Spain El Sol Silver Surfer 1 cover. The interior story is not in there, but still pretty cheap for $39 and for a 9.0. It's not graded, but that's just Heritage or Comic Connect's grade, which is funny that that's Silver Surfer 1 sold for $39, famous cover, and then the She-Hulk cover that's kind of well known from that run, the bathing suit cover, went for twice as much at $80. Alright, so here we go. Another big book, the Koloss, the Incredible Hulk 1 from Norway, 4.5, went for $2,383. So, I think that's a pretty respectable number. I feel like that might have been higher in the past auctions. But the really interesting thing to me is that this book sold almost twice as much as the Koloss, which this is definitely, again, the Koloss is the harder book to find, I think, or at least it's the older of the two, printed in the 60s, whereas the Israeli edition that sold for almost twice as much was printed in the 80s. But it's the Israeli edition is just so cool, and they are extremely hard to find. The Israeli sellers pretty much at this point don't want their books leaving Israel, and I don't think I've seen one sell in a few years at this point. At least not on the open market. I think there was one on eBay that was extremely beat up that I don't know if it ever sold or not, and then I have my spare copy listed on eBay for actually $500 less than this, and I'm not really interested in selling it. I just kind of threw I don't want to sell it price on there, but apparently my I don't want to sell it price is less than what it goes for at auction. But if it sells, it sells. If it doesn't, I'm not worried about it. And I feel like these books have plenty of room to grow, and I got nothing but time just to kind of sit on them and enjoy them. Hulk 181 from Brazil sold for 6.0, sold for $356. It's a pretty high grade from Brazil. So I feel like that was a kind of a low sale, honestly. I thought that would have gone a little higher because these don't come up for sale too often. 5.0 Hulk 1 from Germany went for $332. Not a bad sale, kind of cheap. I think those in the similar grade have gone for $400 or $500 in past auctions. But like I said, the market's not too hot right now. House of Secrets 88 from Mexico went for $485, and it looks like it's signed by Conway. Just got a kind of bunch of filler Mexican, 70s horrors comics. Yeah, I think kind of what hurt this auction might have been that there was just a lot of raw books, like ungraded books. Most people that are buying stuff at auction are going to want graded comics. And look at this is just all raw. And there's so much restoration in Brazil that, I just don't know if people trust it. Luke Cage, Hero for Hire 1 from Italy, 4.5 for 86, and I guess that's not a bad price. I'm not sure if that's a good deal or bad deal, but not the hardest book to find. Green Lantern 1 went for 155. That's actually the second time this was printed in Mexico, so this would be considered a reprint. Bunch more Brazilian stuff. So some of these were selling pretty good, 700, 800. I would have picked this up had I seen it. Giant Size X-Men 1 from Denmark for $69. Yeah, this book I think is from the early 90s, but still not the easiest book to find, and Danish sellers aren't going to sell you one for $69 anymore, I don't think. So that was a good pickup for somebody. This book went pretty cheap. Fantastic Four Annual number 2 for $100. It's a 2.0, so not really a great condition book, but still, classic Doom cover. And I know I've seen a few of these on the Spanish marketplace, and they're definitely asking more than $100. So, another example of books going cheaper in America than they are in foreign countries at this point. $250 for the 6.0 Ghost Rider 1, which is interesting because it's about the same price as, close to the same price as what the Marvel Spotlight 5 got. So this one doesn't seem to come up for sale quite as much as the Marvel Spotlight 5. So maybe that's why it's commanding, decent price. 7.0 German Fantastic Four 48 for $140. This was a super hard to find Fantastic Four number 5 from Norway. Sold for $1,800. I'm kind of surprised. I thought that would have probably sold for more, especially in that grade. But, someone got a good deal because I don't know if I've ever actually seen one of those pop up for sale before. And then this is a Fantastic Four number 1 from Norway for $1,400. Real hard book to find. Really cool color modifications on it with the purple. But, that seems a little inexpensive in my opinion for that book, for a 4.0. I would still love to find one of these books, but I'm the kind of person that's hunting. I want to buy from the country direct, so I'm hoping to find one from a seller in Norway that maybe wants to let one go for $500-$600. Will that happen? Probably not, but that's what I'm holding out for. And if I don't get one, I don't get one. I feel like the key of foreign comics is being patient, and you just can't be desperate. I know the set builders can get desperate, especially if a rare book, they only need one book to finish the set. Basically, they're just a sitting duck for a seller that has that book. They can ask basically any price they want. So best to be patient and just not be desperate. 340 Fantastic Four number 1 Australia. That one does have the poster inside. Fantastic Four number 5 from Brazil, raw copy, sold for $345, and then a 5.5 sold for $632. So that's a pretty strong sale for that book. And I think I've picked one up, maybe a couple years ago from my source in Brazil, and I don't think I paid much more than, $70 for it. A couple non-canon Mexican Spider-Mans were going on in this auction. This one sold for $241, which it's not a bad price because it's a 2.0, pretty rough condition. And then this one that supposedly is like the first blood on a Spider-Man cover, 6.0 for $431. So both decent sales. 6.5 Mexican Spider-Man 129, 130. That seems pretty cheap. I feel like that one, I know it's not what is this? I think the third printing of 129 Mexico, but still, it's not the easiest to find. It's Novedades, so 130 was cheap. Definitely wish I would have picked this one up because this book sold for $24. It's a Jose Luis Duran cover, just kind of a cool cover. It's a Blackhawks, but kind of like a non-canon cover, and you definitely, wouldn't really be able to pick this up from a Mexican seller for $24. So that was a steal of a price. Norwegian Detective Comics 359, 623 for 7.0. That actually seemed a little cheap for that grade because, I know it's Norwegian. They took decent care of their comics, but still 7.0. That's pretty high up there. What else? A bunch of kind of filler Batman books. The Norwegian Daredevil 1 went for 1,125 and a 6.5. I probably would have expected that to go a little higher. Because those Norwegian books were printed pretty close to the American date. This one was definitely a bummer for $900 for a Mexican. Daredevil 1, I would thought that would have easily probably been closer to 1,500. 5.5 isn't too far off. I think the highest graded is 6.5, which is interesting because there's like 6 or 7 graded at 6.5 and nothing above it. I've owned, I don't know, a couple 6.5s, and I just couldn't believe I could never get anything higher than a 6.5. Denmark sold for $382, so a pretty big deficit between Denmark, Norway, and Mexico. So definitely, seems to be that Denmark was not quite as high on the want list, and then Daredevil 1 from Brazil sold for $690. So I think this Daredevil from Brazil, I think, is printed in the late 60s, maybe 68, 69. The Danish, I'm not too sure. I don't want to click on the picture because it's going to screw everything up. Conan 1 sold for $265. From Australia, Newton, cool, crazy colors on it. It's kind of the best thing about the Newtons is the crazy colors. Captain America 100, La Prensa from Mexico, 6.0, which is high grade, sold for $368. Pretty decent price there. This one was definitely a letdown. 3.5 3.5 Brave and Bold 28 First Justice League 419. That was definitely, I've seen way worse copies sell for way more. So I'm not sure why that book's not getting any love. Like I said, I think the Brazilian market's kind of getting a little saturated, a little flooded. Some of the other foreign sellers, I guess, that aren't from Brazil need to step up and list some books because people, I think, had their fill of all these Brazilian keys. Netherlands Batman 251 for $247. Seems not too bad, I guess. Super hard book to find, 5.5, went for $800. Batman 227 from Mexico. I have one. Mine's probably a little bit less condition than that, but I should probably go ahead and just send it to CGC because mine's still raw. And then 3.5 Batman 227 from from Lebanon, almost impossible to find. Sold for $755, which seems like a pretty good price. That I thought would have commanded over $1,000. Germany, which is probably one of the easiest countries to get Batman 251, sold for $218. And then from there we go to the hardest country to find, Colombia 251, sold for $527, but it's also a 1.0, so pretty low grade there. Batman 1 from Egypt, but you got to remember this was printed in the 80s and most likely pulled from a bind, sold for $1,300. So these comics I don't even think were even known about up until maybe a couple years ago. So a cool book. They're from the 80s. I don't think I'd pay over $500 for one myself personally. That's just me. But who knows? And it could be the next Hulk one from Israel, where there's not that many of them, hard to find, and it could kind of be a perfect storm of, even though it's from the 80s, people don't care, they want that cover, which with that Arabic text on it looks pretty amazing. Brazilian keys, Batman 227 for $224. It's pretty cheap. 222, the Beatles cover in high grade went for $195. Another 227 and 65 went for $368. So they're just kind of flooding the market with all these Brazilian keys. And I couldn't believe this sold this cheap. Batman 181 for $150, and you can't even touch that price from a Brazilian seller. On Facebook or Instagram, if you're hooking up with a Brazilian seller, they're going to want at least twice that. A bunch of random stuff here. I think we're kind of getting to the bottom. 80 Avengers 4 for $116 seems pretty cheap. 80 Avengers 8 from Italy for $230. Yeah, not a bad price, and those aren't hard to find in high grade. So this is a cool Mexican non-canon book. Uses the Reaper, I think his name is. He's like a Batman cover. I think it was a Neil Adams cover, but they put Spider-Man in it, so it's kind of a cool mashup. For $276 that sold. Avengers 1 from Mexico, incredibly hard to find, sold for $1,700 or almost $1,800. So that was a pretty good deal there, for 4 or 5. Looks like a nice presenting copy. Avengers 1 from Mexico, you're not going to probably get too many chances to get by that. Most of this stuff is Spider-Man 3 from Mexico for $482. It's going to be a pretty tough book to find, being that it's from 1963. $605 for Spider-Man number 2. That seems kind of cheap, seeing as we're getting almost to number 1 territory there. Spider-Man 300 from Italy, $161. That seems pretty cheap. And then a 50 for $69. I don't think either of those you would be able to buy straight from Italy on Italian eBay for those prices. Especially not when you factor in slabbing and all that stuff, and the chances of getting some restoration. Those went cheap. 50 Spider-Man 101 for $63. That's incredibly cheap. And half of these books you could probably buy and list for twice the double or triple on eBay and just sit on them, and they're going to sell eventually. 50 Spider-Man 129 from Greece sold for $500. That's a pretty great price there. A lot of these books I own them just in my head, thinking I really need to get back into grading some of these. I started running out of room for all these graded comics. I have a whole kind of like cabinet full of just nothing but foreign slabbed comics, and that's completely full. So if I'm going to grade any more books, I either need to sell some and just keep the ones I'm going to really want, or just hold off on grading for a while. But some of these auction results make me want to hurry up and grade some books. 122 from Greece sold for $414. More German keys that are pretty easy to find in high grade. This one, 7.5, sold for $396. That's kind of surprising. It's a pretty high price for a German 129. 1,700 for the French Canadian 129. So that's a pretty awesome price. I was kind of surprised it went that high, but these French Canadian books are extremely hard to find. Small print runs, so it's kind of a perfect storm. So there's probably quite a few guys building that set that needed that one. Here we are again with, for some reason, this raw copy sold for $140, and this slabbed copy sold for $97. So not really sure why, but I don't know, who knows. ASM 129 from Brazil, 50, sold for $461. It seems a little cheap for me. I feel like you can't even buy one raw in pretty terrible shape for less than $300. So 50 for $461, that's cheap. Here we go, more doubles, more Brazilian doubles. I'm not sure why they're doing that. It's just killing their own auction prices. This was a couple $1,000 book not that long ago, I feel like, and now it's down to $920, 7.0. That's very high grade for Brazil. So it's probably not the result they were hoping for. I was thinking at least probably close to 1,500, if not 2,000. More Newton keys, some Portuguese books. This was a big one. A Lebanese Amazing Fantasy 15 cover. It's cover only. The interior story isn't Amazing Fantasy 15, but just an amazing, cool book. And that one sold for $3,566. So these a lot of times are pulled from a bind, so you really got to be careful and make sure you don't end up with a trimmed, pulled from a bind cover or a copy. And if you get it cheap, then yeah, go for it. But I got one that was pulled from a bind that was in okay condition, but still pretty rough, and I paid, I think, about $300 for it. This book, I kind of wish I just would have picked it up, because I just sold a 4.5, or was it a 4.5? Yeah, pretty sure it was a 4.5 on eBay, or 4.0, Adventure Comics 247, First Legion of Superheroes. I sold mine for $675. So the fact that this sold for $220 was a steal for somebody. And I just sold that one on eBay, less than 2 months ago. $500 for Action Comics 252 from Lebanon. Really hard book to find. I thought that would have probably gone higher than 500, just because you never see them come up for sale. And this was surprising that this one went for about the same price as the Mexican. The Brazilian, I think, is much more common than the Mexican. Someone didn't really know the rarity, or people didn't really know the rarity of that Mexican one, because that should have gotten way more than the Brazilian. All right, I think that is it. So, interesting results. Like I said, I think it was kind of the weakest of the three Comic Connect auctions, but still, some books just had great prices, and other ones, the majority of the books really were deals. So, if you're a collector that wants to kind of get some good deals, maybe it's time to start checking out these auctions, because, last year these were, the numbers were insane. Like those random Italian keys selling for over $1,000 was just made no sense at all. So, I think people